Dave, can I borrow some money? Can I borrow some money? Oh, yeah, it is.
And this rules are easy.
Okay, I'm going to wait a little bit, so. Let me know when you're ready. Let me know when you're ready. Okay, you have your speech all ready? Yeah, you'd be like, hey, I don't remember what her name is. No? Good evening and welcome to St. John's. I'm Allison Kavanaugh. I'm the current president of the Women of the ELCA here. We refer to ourselves as WELCA, so if you're not familiar with that term, that's what it means, Women of the ELCA. Thank you all for coming tonight, as the new series this year is titled, We Belong Together. Please feel free to help yourself to coffee and treats while you listen. At this time, I'd like to take a moment to read our land acknowledgement. St. John's Church stands on the ancestral homelands of the Wapakute, I'm sure I said that wrong, Wapakute band of the Dakota Nation. We respect and are grateful for the generations of Native people who have cared for this land. A few announcements before we get started. Tonight's program is being recorded for our Courageous Conversations Library of Speakers, which you can find on the St. John's website. There are WELCA books at the registration table describing WELCA's work here at St. John's and the contacts for our committees and special groups. Please take one if you're interested in joining in on some of the service projects and activities, field trips hosted by the women of our church. We do have a free will offering basket at the door. WELCA maintains a fiscal independence from St. John's Church. The funds help support our Courageous Conversation programming and many other outreach programs that the women of St. John's carry out throughout the world. The next mission morning is coming up on September 28th from 9 to noon. Our speaker that day will be, for the program Before We Pack the Kits, will be Kim Dickey from Global Health Ministries, for whom the kits that we packed that day will be donated. Last year, we were able to host 2 mission mornings, and just as an example, between the 2 events, we were able to pack several hundred kits for Lutheran World Relief. I'd like to invite all the women for a wonderful morning of missions, muffins, and mingling. We will have a question and answer following the program, when you are welcome to step up to the microphone with your questions. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the members of the Justice and Education Committee of WELCA that are responsible for putting together such an impressive slate of speakers this year. Joe Franklin, Don Tommerdahl, Michelle Kramer-Prevost, and Margie O'Laughlin, who will now introduce our speaker.
Welcome, everyone. As Allison mentioned, our theme for our series this year is We Belong to One Another. So in that spirit, you can take a moment and greet your table mates with a smile or a nod, or a friendly word. It's my great pleasure to introduce Kathryn Lozado to you tonight. Kathryn has been the lead Southern Minnesota congregational organizer with the nonprofit Isaiah for the last 7 years, organizing people of faith and shared values to work toward racial, economic, and climate justice. We are so happy to welcome her as our first Courageous Conversation speaker of 2024-25. Before joining Isaiah, Kathryn worked at the intersections of immigration and education with Witness for Peace, Borderlinks, and Greenvale Park Community School here in Northfield. She studied international relations and Latin American studies at Carleton College and earned her MA from American University in Public Administration and Policy. She will share her thoughts tonight about what communities need to thrive and how people can work together, I wrote this in capital letters, across divisions to strengthen the beloved community on state and local levels. And there's more. Kathryn will share 3 action steps for helping us achieve this. Feel free to take notes in your bulletins to help you remember the action steps. There will be time for Q&A at the end of her prepared words. We have a mic set up right there for those who wish to speak their questions. If you prefer to have your questions read, please use the yellow note cards. Does everybody see their little pile of yellow note cards? There's one on each table. And Don and Joe will collect them. Building, repairing, and restoring are core tenets of Isaiah. And we all know much work needs to be done in our country no matter what happens on November 5th. Before Kathryn begins her presentation, I'll read the opening stanza of a meditation by Brian McLaren. Our committee has decided to read these words before each Conversations presentation. We hope you will grow in appreciation of them, the words, as they grow in familiarity. This is my dream, and perhaps it is your dream, our dream, that in this time of turbulence, when worlds are falling apart, all of us with willing hearts can come together with one another, poor and rich, whatever our race or gender, wherever we live, whatever our religion or education. I dream that we can come together in a circle of shared humanity, in a sphere as big as the whole earth, to rediscover ourselves as Earth's multicultured, multicolored children, members of Team Earth. Kathryn Lozado.
All right, is this live? Okay. Wow, thank you so much, Margie. Thank you, everyone, for having me here tonight. And whether you're coming from St. John's, another faith community in the area, or as a neighbor with shared values, excited to be in this conversation with you all tonight. So just getting myself grounded in this spirit of beloved community and the intention of Isaiah, I think a through line for my life has been how I was raised in a very social justice-oriented Presbyterian church, though I also come from a tradition of very good Lutherans as well. My dad grew up Missouri Synod Lutheran on a farm outside of a town of 13 in northeast Iowa. My mom grew up moving around New England a bit in like Methodism and I think Presbyterianism and some other faith community smatterings across the liberal tradition in New England, and then they met here in the Minneapolis area playing tennis and decided to raise me as a tennis player, a sportswoman, and as a very social justice-oriented person to walk in the world in that way. I so appreciated hearing from especially my elders outside of my parents that I was growing up with, how they walked in the world, always asking the question of how do we love God and love our neighbors in everything that we do. And some of them wrestled with the idea of God at all, but how do we love our neighbors in everything that we do? And I think that's really formed my question for my life and how to be most effective at working for social justice in everything that I do and hopefully paying the bills along the way also. And I'm grateful to be in this work and in this room with you all tonight. So you may have heard the term beloved community, and want to hearken that back to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., described the beloved community as a society where caring and compassion drive political policies that support the worldwide elimination of poverty and hunger and all forms of bigotry and violence. And at its core, the beloved community is an engine of reconciliation. To me, that seems very similar to the founding verse of my organization, Isaiah, that you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in, from Isaiah 58:12. That's why we decided to call tonight's conversation Repairing the Beloved Community, because beloved community is something of a verb. And in these times when our people, our congregations, our communities need healing from a pandemic and from division, ways that we are being intentionally divided, and it can feel even more heightened during election season, doesn't it? The invitation tonight is to consider how we can identify shared values, wherever they come from for you, how we strengthen our community here tonight and get even more courage to have these kinds of conversations with our loved ones that may feel the scariest, conversations with more of our neighbors beyond these walls as well. And there will be a call to action at the end with some strategic steps forward beyond tonight that you all get to decide and discern as individuals, but this is a collective action and invitation. Democracy is a team sport. Are we down for that tonight? Okay. So this may be a little bit of a refresher for some of you. I'll back up for 1 second. So Isaiah 101. So Isaiah is a home for people of faith and shared values acting collectively and powerfully towards racial, economic, and climate justice in Minnesota formed around the year 2000, bringing together several faith-based community organizations in the cities in St. Cloud, realizing we're facing some of the same issues in our community. Why are people still hungry? Why are people still needing housing? Why do people not have the living wages they need? We feel like we're putting on Band-Aids. We could be more effective if we work together. So they did some mergers and took more collective action to not only put on the Band-Aids, but also how do we go upstream and shape our systems, shape the collective decision-making, interrupt the existing systems of injustice. So the roots are faith-based organizing, and also Isaiah has grown and changed a lot over the last few years in particular. So now, beyond over 100 Christian spectrum of congregations across the state and increasingly statewide, Northfield was the first Southern Minnesota satellite site, so I started getting involved with many of you all as a volunteer before they created a Southern Minnesota community organizer position. And then some of my colleagues have created more rooms of the House of Isaiah, a Muslim coalition with over 40 mosques signed on across the state. Black Barbershop and Congregation Cooperative, recognizing that barbershops and beauty salons are spaces of community building and agency, in particular in African American communities that often feel left behind in our politics because our systems have been designed that way. To see themselves in one another and to see themselves as, yeah, we gotta work together across race, across religion, towards the things that we all need to thrive. We also have the Kids Count on Us Childcare Center Organizing Coalition with over 500 community-based childcare centers across the state, because a union doesn't quite exist yet for childcare centers, and they're on the forefront of pouring into our littlest Minnesotans, and often the equation doesn't work for families to get the care they need affordably, much less make sure that those who are caring for our littlest ones also get the living wages and just treatment that they need too. And then our Young Adult Coalition started during the pandemic, organizing people on college campuses and sometimes in breweries with people under the age of 40, because we meet people where they're at, right? Recognizing that we need a multi-generational movement towards the things that we all need. It will take all of us, and to see ourselves in one another, as well as our rural organizing project. I think is our newest room in the House of Isaiah and our sibling organization, Faith in Minnesota. Many of you might be familiar with my colleague Todd Lippert, who helped start Isaiah here in Northfield when he was minister of First UCC, decided to run for state legislature and was like our first person, our first member, our first real partner on the inside of the state legislature, advancing our values and what can we get done together in challenging circumstances. And he was realizing our rural communities are left behind in so many ways. Our existing two-party system isn't meeting rural communities' needs in a lot of ways. A politics of efficiency and trying to get to 50% plus one of the votes with lots of ads and mailers as the most efficient way to realize people or recognize and connect with people that are spread out from one another is not the kind of healing relational politics in trust that a lot of our people need desperately and takes time and intention, relationship building, and year-round organizing. So he decided to start the Rural Organizing Project. And one of my wonderful people, Kathleen Dora Norton, has been involved with Isaiah for years and will give a few minutes later on about the Rural Organizing Project, Room of the House of Isaiah, and what's going on here in Rice County in particular, and what we can do about it together. So we're trying to build a new people-centered, planet-centered Minnesota together. It is a political thing. It is a vehicle to put our faith and shared values into action and build multiracial, multi-faith, beloved community together. So I'm going to reference your packet that you should all have hopefully at your table, and I'll reference that a few times throughout tonight, but basically what I talk through is the first page of your packet. And some of your institutions are also already institutional members of Isaiah and helping steward this as our vehicle together. Some of you all might be in discernment or want to chat with me more about that. I'll plant that seed for you and we can talk more about it later. But I want to go to this idea of faith and politics. Who has tension about faith and politics? I heard a lot of nervous laughter and some hands. I wanted to dig into that a little bit with you all tonight. Because often we might think politics is like dirty. Ugh, it seems like a dumpster fire. I don't want to touch it. We shouldn't touch it in church. Ultimately, politics is collective decision making. That is a neutral thing. I don't think any one party, again, in the world as it is, can fully represent someone's values. Parties are also made up of people making decisions that they think will improve their lives, right? As Isaiah and as faith communities, nonpartisan organizations, our job is to not find some ideal middle ground between the existing two parties as they are in the world as it is. Our job is to stay rooted in our faith and values and to try to push on the whole system from the outside, sometimes from the inside. How do we do that as we participate? How do we shape the public narrative and say no to a politics of fear and division and say this is what, from my faith tradition or my values, this is what I think our world should look like here on earth. How do we get closer to recognizing that here on earth and in public? And that's contested. Our democracy should be more about us than a particular party or candidate. Sometimes it feels like, okay, democracy is just checking a box every 4 years and like hoping that they'll save us, or at least not completely destroy us. But our democracy should be more about us than a particular party or a candidate. We can talk about some politicians and leadership in relationship to our values and what people need. And again, it is a year-round team sport beyond just checking a box once every 4 years. Our elected officials are supposed to work for us. And when we act collectively, that is the best mechanism for accountability, a responsive collective decision-making, because it affects us and people we love. Politics is personal. Often it feels like there are systems happening or big headlines. Those things are affecting us and people we love. And often we might feel like people are making decisions about us, without us in St. Paul or in DC. Or that we're supposed to stick to the headlines or feel like we have a PhD on a subject before we even step into the conversation. Does that resonate with anyone? I've felt like that my whole life, that I've not had the right words, so I shouldn't even step in. Or I'm not a climate scientist. There are smart people working on that. I'm glad they are. Many of you in this room have been working on climate for decades. And what we've seen is it takes significant amounts of regular people saying, the climate crisis is here. Here's how it's affecting us and our local communities. We have this decade to act. It will take a whole lot of us saying we need solutions right now, tangible ways to decarbonize at speed and at scale. And it's taken an intergenerational movement of like 50 organizations to do something about it together here in Minnesota. That is a thing that impacts us and people we love. It's not just polar bears and melting ice cap, right? Polar bears and melting ice caps, right? It's about us and you and your kids and your grandkids. And for me to consider having human children, because that feels like a very weighty decision to consider. So we're trying to build power is the ability to get things done, not just for power over others, to bend others to our will, which often is what we feel about power. Power is the ability to get things done, to see our values realized in the world, and power for the common good. So about faith and politics, we're whole people. Sometimes we're told, like, keep your faith over here and your politics over here, but we're whole people. Our government shouldn't tell us to have a religion or how to practice one, but that's unidirectional. We're whole people. And faith communities have an incredibly powerful role. Nonpartisan does not mean neutral. It means committed to our faith and values. And if many faith traditions are saying we recognize every single human being as a beloved child of God, worthy of dignity and respect, therefore, what could our collective decision-making look like if that's what it reflected? So I know many of us are really concerned about the rise of white Christian nationalism, and I'm glad you have more of an expert coming to you all in October, but I wanted to situate tonight's conversation naming that white Christian nationalism makes it seem like there's only one way to be a Christian in politics or in public. And that's not what it looks like from my faith tradition or how I was raised, in the love God and love your neighbor in everything that we do, no matter their faith tradition, if they have one at all, no matter where they were born, no matter the color of their skin, no matter the language they speak at home. White Christian nationalism is not just a religious thing, it's been an intentional, crafted strategy for 50 years. The latest flavor and a power strategy, the latest flavor for our country to only work well for a handful of wealthy, white, I'm going to put Christian in quotes, men. The latest flavor of a thing that's been going on since the beginning of our country. And it's taken struggle and movement building to create, expand democracy for more people. And then there's those that feel threatened by that and backlash. It has the most direct harm on our beloved neighbors of color, but also Muslim and Jewish neighbors, our LGBTQ neighbors, and ultimately harms all of us because it puts a ceiling on what is possible in our collective decision making. Most people want the same things, to feel safe and loved in our communities, like we can belong, like we have enough resources to take care of ourselves and our loved ones. And it looks like we have a say in decisions that affect our lives. Does that resonate? Yeah. So most faith traditions say instead of white Christian nationalism, I'm curious for you all to share with your neighbors in a second. But most faith traditions say instead, we're called to love God, we're called to love our neighbors in everything that we do, that there is a world of abundance. The loaves and fishes comes from my tradition. But in this country, we also live in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. That is true in our politics and in our current reality as well. So there's no good reason anyone is going without. There's no good reason anyone's going without. We're also called to welcome the immigrant and the stranger. We're called to protect and look out for the marginalized. We're called to love our neighbors in our charity, in our service, and in our systems. So I'm going to invite you all to turn to page 2 in your packets, because that will probably be easier to see than this up here on the screen. It's the same thing. All right, so we'll spend a few minutes with this. And I want to name this document as a living, breathing document. It's been updated a few times over the last few years. Some of you have been part of shaping this document along the way. Our Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota Claiming Our Voices Values agenda is our guiding, moral set of principles, our guiding vision, that everything we do in Isaiah is to make this more of a reality here on earth. And I'm curious if this resonates with your faith, your values as well. Because again, this is a living, breathing document that we get to shape together with regular people like you. So it was initially created in 2017 by 5,000 people across the state doing intentional listening in house meetings, congregational forums, one-on-one conversations, and sharing those themes back. And the purpose of creating this kind of document as our guiding vision, our North Star, what are we for in the world, is because of the start of the Trump administration, and we and many of our partner organizations were seeing significant harm coming to many of our communities, our state in Minnesota. We were fighting a lot of bad stuff at the state legislature and nationally. We started a sanctuary movement with partners to protect more of our immigrant neighbors. It was like Sanctuary Movement Part 2, because the first one was in the 80s that my home church was a part of before I was born. And a season of prophetic resistance, we called it, was necessary but also exhausting. Like, just chasing ambulances, fighting the bad stuff is exhausting, right? We've been through the pandemic together. Survival mode is exhausting. So we needed to come to our people and ask, how are our systems affecting us and people we love? Who benefits from that? What does our faith and values say about who we are to one another, and what beloved community should look like if we bring that about here on earth, and therefore what do we do about it together? And created this document. 5,000 people just like you, some of you included. So I want to invite people to turn to a neighbor for a few minutes. Ideally, someone you don't know very well, so if you need to move around a little bit, but I want to give you a few minutes. I'm going to put a set of questions up here to discuss, where do you see your faith or values in this vision statement? What's resonating? Are there any tensions coming up? Is there something missing? What would it mean for you, your loved ones, our community, if we made this a reality? And as I invite you to practice here in the room a courageous conversation, I want us to be in the spirit of sharing with vulnerability, of sharing from your personal experience. We all are the experts of our experience. Listen with compassionate curiosity and not judgment, but curiosity of why? That sounds important to you. Where did that come from for you? Those kinds of questions. And then the personal details that you share with each other, keep those confidential in your conversation, because you may decide to share some really personal things, but the themes can surface to the wider room. How does that sound? Okay. All right, turn to a neighbor, and I'll give you a few minutes. right, take one more minute. Make sure you've heard from your neighbor if you haven't yet. All right, come on back. Thank you, everyone. How did that feel?
Interesting.
Okay, interesting. Other feeling words? Overwhelming? Who said overwhelming? You want to say a little bit more about why? I was going to repeat, but go for it.
You have to be around all the time, don't you? No, what the thing is that I think that we haven't made an awful lot of progress. And you hope that you can leave a world better than you found it.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, and you say, well, at least I've taught my kids, but evidently not. It's hard. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I think at the beginning you were saying, you've been around for a bit and witnessing how our country has led and how our country treats those who don't have as much. Sounds like a violation to your values and something you want to make better for the next generations. And that is our collective work. I will share some good news on some progress we've made in a second here, but I just wanted us to sit with that because there is more work to do, and it is a work of a lifetime. If that values agenda is resonating with you, this is the work of a lifetime. And how do we make progress with the time we have, try to leave things better, and equip the next generations to keep going? It's a good question. Any other feeling words, how that was for you? And I can help repeat from the front of the room.
Difficulty having hope about it.
Difficulty having hope about it. Thanks. I see some nods. You're not the only one. Yeah. Any tensions that came up for people? Or in general, this aligns and is like, okay, how do we make this happen? Okay, that's the general trend. I don't want to skip over anybody that, it's okay that this isn't perfect. This is a living, breathing document that we get to keep working on together. And again, I'm happy to stick around later too, or have follow-up conversations if people want to chat more with me directly as well. Just wanted to offer that. So it matters that we practice having that kind of conversation here tonight, and that trying to reground ourselves in that values space can be a very difficult practice when we leave a space like this tonight too. But I wanted us to at least do some of that together here tonight, because some of our neighbors aren't open to even that kind of values conversation, but some are. And it can be the best entry point when we say, this is why this matters to me and people I love. What about you? And when we get out of the headlines or our silos, we find much more in common than we're told. But people have to be open to that. So we start from where we can start. So in Isaiah, and the invitation to all of you is that we have lots of tools in the toolbox to make this a reality here on earth. And sometimes it takes years, lots of persistence, feels like flinging spaghetti at the wall to try to make some progress towards this, and on different levels of decision making. So one of the things I really love about Isaiah is that we're strategic. We ask, if this is the world we're trying to create, how do we start from the world as it is? Who gets to decide right now? Can we partner with them? Can we say, here's what we're hearing our people need. How do we address this together? In election season, sometimes the question is, can we make sure that those who want to represent us are hearing our community needs and values loud and clear? Because no candidate is perfect either. They're also a beautiful, beloved, messy, imperfect child of God too, and it can be hard to have grace for those who we don't see aligning as much with our values. And the question is, what can we work on together, or do we need to find somebody different to partner with? Right? Who and what party, is the best vehicle, public transportation, to get us closest to make this a reality in election season, but election season about creating the conditions to make that more possible, right? It's not an end-all, be-all, check a box, hope for the best. It's how do we create the conditions for this to be more possible, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. So lots of work in different seasons, different tools in the toolbox, asking the question of how do we make that possible in everything that we do, and many congregations like this one are doing great work to try to meet immediate needs in the community. But when we come together across many faith communities, across people with shared values, across all the rooms in the house of Isaiah, or where people need to find agency, we can do more and address the systems that perpetuate injustice. And just to name also, we partner with a lot of other wonderful partner organizations too. Going to this invocation for faith in politics. One of Minnesota's heroes, right? Paul Wellstone's Politics for the Common Good. The one we're really familiar with is we all do better when we all do better. How do we live into that spirit in our collective decision-making, in our politics? And he also said, politics is about the improvement of people's lives. It's about advancing the cause of peace and justice in our country and the world. Politics is about doing well for the people. So if we hold on to that as we consider what our collective decision-making should look like and feel like, I think that's what it should be about. And we can try to find some hope in that. It is hard to be persistent and hopeful all the time and hold that is the work of a lifetime, and what can we do about it right now? What can we do about it in the next 6 months? What can we do about it in the next 5 years, right? But we did work for 5, 10, 20 years to create the conditions, persistently organizing thousands of people of faith and shared values, and finally created the conditions to win a bunch of things at the state legislature in 2023. Is this sounding familiar? We have some reason for tangible, practical hope that we won some things and we've got more work to do. We'll get to the more work to do in a second. But we also have to celebrate the wins along the way so we can feel some hope that moves us forward. So this is page 3 in your packet. If you would like to turn to that for even a fuller reference, I'll just talk through top lines here. Some of this may feel familiar to you all, but in the buckets of inclusive democracy, caring economy, just climate future, we won a whole bunch of things with partners in 2023 and then some more stepping stones in 2024 because we basically won all the things we were working towards in 2023 and then needed to keep going. So you'll have the full list for your reference on page 3. But to name in the inclusive democracy bucket, driver licenses for all Minnesota residents regardless of citizenship status, re-winning that in Minnesota because we used to do that until 2003, when Governor Pawlenty took that away using anti-immigrant fear-mongering in the wake of 9/11. that is a tangible thing that like Northfield helped build up towards in the state level. We passed the resident IDs here in Northfield, saying that our people, our residents of our beloved community, are just trying to work hard, take care of their families, get to work, get to the doctor, get their kids to school, and need a driver's license to say, you know, this is who we are, we belong here, to exist in our community, and be recognized as beloved neighbors too. So we built up to that from what we made possible here in Northfield with the city IDs. And again, it took years to pass that at the state level to restore driver's licenses for all. We worked for 20 years also to restore the vote so that our returning citizens, after incarceration coming back to community, should be full participants in community, not wait sometimes decades till they were off probation or parole. And the Democracy for the People package that has like already started getting implemented, that we have automatic voter registration to make it easier for people to fully participate, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds so that young people can just like get started being ready to be voters. And that goes live the second they turn 18. And there's additional support and resources and protections for accessibility, language justice, protecting election officials who are on the front lines of administering our democracy that is increasingly under threat. Under the Just Climate bucket, we've been working towards, and Northfield again helped lead the way by passing a climate action plan, by setting a goal of 100% clean energy, what, in 2017? Right? Some of you all in the room worked up, yeah, about that. Yes, and took years to build that up to the state level. The biggest speed and scale action we could take collectively took a big multi-generational statewide 50-organization coalition movement to pass 100% clean energy by 2040. That is getting implemented, and now we can build off of that big win, and we're one of the top 5 climate states in the country in terms of climate policy. Transportation is the #1 climate emissions producing sector in Minnesota, and so what we can do to get people on more effective transit reduces emissions, gets cars off the road, and we also need to cleaner transportation over time. So we worked with partners to pass $500 million a year for new transit funding that's mainly in the metro area so they can update and expand out to the suburbs. We've got more work to do to make sure this works for our greater Minnesota communities too, so that's a thing to keep working on. The Department of Transportation will have to consider climate impacts in new infrastructure projects. So safety is still #1 consideration, climate is #2. For us to build climate resilient infrastructure and to make sure that we are being intentional and sustainable about how we connect our people. That is incredibly important and often not recognized. And then this past year, since we're like, okay, we passed 100% clean energy, we also worked to establish geothermal pilots and a site suitability study. So again, Northfield paving the way with Carleton, and this fall with the school referendum to potentially add a geothermal system and energy efficiency while we update a much needed high school building update, right? Northfield could be the model for our country on what a small town climate leader looks like. And with our state legislation, it enables more pilots for good, clean energy and what the transition from natural gas to clean energy from our earth could look like. And switch, I'm using just in quotes, the pipes, the same pipes used for natural gas could be switched over to geothermal energy. We've made some progress here and we can keep going. So we catalyzed more of that at the state legislature as well. Very exciting. I'm nerding out about it. And then in our caring economy bucket, one of the things that we recognize is a care crisis, in particular in greater Minnesota, that we even more so take care of our loved ones who may not be a blood relative too. We pitch in for our neighbors. We look out for one another. And as our healthcare is getting further and further away, services getting taken away from our local communities, people need to go further and further for care or drive an hour to have a baby, it matters that we are building the pathway to a universal healthcare system so people have the affordable care they need close by, and also that we can take the time we need to care for one another, to care for ourselves, without breaking the bank or losing our job. So we've established one of the strongest paid family and medical leave programs in the country as well for every Minnesota worker across the state, up to 12 weeks, and most of your wages replaced. And everybody pitches in a little bit. Everybody can take that time when they need to, and there's additional support for small businesses to make sure that we're leveling the playing field. And then the Minnesota Care Public Option is the pathway to expand that already really good public health insurance program for every Minnesota resident, also regardless of citizenship. Recognizing especially our immigrant neighbors are on the front lines of some of the toughest jobs through the pandemic. They were mainly our people that looked out for us and had to keep working on those frontline jobs. Our health and well-being is interconnected, and so we and our partner Unidos especially fought really hard, and it was like in the last few days of the legislature in 2023 that we passed the Minnesota Care Public Option to expand that program to every resident, regardless of citizenship, and that is the infrastructure that we can build on to have a universal healthcare system. More work to do, but we've laid the pathway, okay? And then these were mostly one-time dollars, so this is the question mark of how we address our community's needs in a sustainable way from our state level going forward, but $1 billion for affordable childcare and $1 billion for affordable housing. Big wins. You all helped make possible, and we've got more work to do. So, can I get a hallelujah from that? And it's not just like the applause is not just for me, okay? That's for us. We helped make that possible together. We need to actively celebrate the wins sometimes to again propel us forward, that we can make some wins and have a responsive democracy when we make it work for us, right? Hold on to that so we don't just keep fast forwarding to all the things we still have to go fix. I want to give us some examples about what we as regular people did to make all those big wins possible. So we had lots of strategy meetings. People ask what my day as organizing looks like, and I'm like, it's lots of phone calls and emails and meetings, right? Lots of strategy meetings, lots of contacts to legislators for our agenda, emails, paper signups at church. We shape the narrative with social media, letters to the editor of our local paper, faith leaders sign on letters, key moments where we carpooled to the Capitol for big coalition rallies, key hearings, visiting with our legislators there, trying to go to them. Some of you have testified along the way. We've also, so this was a rally for the Minnesota Care Public Option with Isaiah and Unidos, and then passing the 100% clean energy bill by 2040. Actually, would you raise your hand if you were in either of these moments? Okay, I saw a couple of you. Awesome. Okay, some of you might be in this bus that we took, a Northfield prophetic delegation to the Capitol. See some familiar faces? Yeah. Sometimes it's hard for us in greater Minnesota to feel like we have a say in St. Paul. Sometimes we've got to get ourselves to the Capitol and make it a collective effort. Okay. There's another one with that same crew. So we met with Representative Purcell. That was like a year ago, right? And then part of our work is to bring the Capitol to us. Because again, democracy should work for us, elected officials should work for us. So we had what we call an in-district meeting with Representative Purcell at First UCC. That was April 2023, where we asked questions on our terms. Some of you were sharing your stories about, I'm really concerned about this issue. This is affecting me because what can we do about it together? Well, how can our state lead, right? We had weekly Southern Minnesota co-governance Zooms, where over the years we've built a cohort of 6 partner legislators across the region who are committed to meeting with our people and talking about our agenda priorities and what are you learning, what will it take to get them done, give us action steps. Some of your faces are in there too, right? And lifting up the issues that you were most excited about to pass. I think that was our celebration at the end of that legislative session in 2023, where after we won all the things. Rep Purcell is in there. I see Matt Roan. I see Judy Tonoli. I see Dottie. Okay. I was like, I know there's some of you in there. And then I know we had a healthcare listening session with legislators at Bethel, and we did a transportation equity listening session at Carleton with students and community members this past spring as well, to name, we've still got big needs in greater Minnesota transportation equity. How do we build out a vision that connects our people, our whole state, our communities within and to each other? We follow the above approach with buses and passenger rail as possible, again, you all, and EV infrastructure so we can connect our whole state and make that transition, reduce climate emissions along the way, and not get anybody stranded, right? And Carleton students are like one of the front edges of that conversation. And we can make that possible and call for significant collective investments to come to our whole state, and again, from where we are. So those are some examples of what we have made possible together, regular people like you all. This isn't just because we have a policy director who's a registered lobbyist at the state capitol. This isn't just because our directors are super smart, which they are, but they don't just write our agenda for us in their office and say, let's go do it. It's us that we shape and build and make this possible together. So I want to give another turn to your neighbor moment and discuss what are you excited about from the recent wins? And again, reference your packet in page 3 if you need to. What would make a difference for you and people you love? Because again, politics is personal. What resonates in the new agenda priorities, which is on page 4 if you want to start looking at together. And what else would you like to see in our beloved community? So top lines of the next agenda priorities that we've refreshed with our people, because again, we haven't fixed all the things yet. We did another deep listening season. Many of you were involved with that last fall, to share back the wins and then to say, what do our communities still need? Climate, housing, transportation, investing in our young people in childcare and youth programming, and a care spectrum, elder care, healthcare, mental health, childcare, right? All that whole spectrum of care, and the inclusive, strong democracy that undergirds and makes all that possible, right? That's the continued work going forward. So I want to invite you all to turn to a neighbor, discuss those questions, take a few, and then we'll come back. one more minute and come on back. Okay, thanks everyone. Glad we're having spirited discussions with our neighbors. Did those priorities generally resonate? Were you thinking about how some of these things could help you or people you love, and what's next? I saw some nods. Okay, let's see the thumbs up, love it. Okay, general resonance, anything we're missing, or you're still like, yep, we need more work on this thing that we didn't talk about yet? It's okay if there is. We can't, like, Isaiah is an organization that works with many of you all, and we can't work on all the things where we spread ourselves too thin and be ineffective, and that's why we partner with a lot of people, but curious, what else is on your hearts? Yeah?
Elder care.
Elder care, yeah. Yes, it's a growing need. And if we are living into that value of every single human being, no matter their age, is worthy of dignity and respect, that means the care they need for their whole life and the resources to do it well. Thank you. And especially in this community, right? We've made ourselves the place to retire, and it should be a good, dignified retirement, yeah? And good living wages for those who do the elder care. All connected. Okay. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was happy to see the strong language about immigration and also that you were able to accomplish the driver's license
Yeah.
restoration for non-citizens. And I'm just curious, what are the logical next steps for immigration, given all the negative rhetoric that's
Yeah.
going around?
Thank you.
Election cycle.
Yeah. I'll try to summarize. So excited to see the wins, especially for immigrant justice and returning citizens, and what's next on those fronts, especially given in particular, the demonization of our immigrant neighbors we saw in the debate, right? There's a particular purpose for that kind of language, again, is to dehumanize some of our beloved neighbors, to make especially white people afraid, or to say they're not worthy, and to turn us away from the collective solutions that we all need, and pitching in our collective resources together. So part of our work is to do the narrative shaping for us as people of faith and shared values to be loud and say that's not okay, and here's the valid alternative. Here's what our faith and values say. Here's what actually most people believe or say they believe, that we're called to recognize every beloved child of God and worthy of dignity and respect, no matter where they come from, no matter the color of their skin, no matter the language they speak at home. Using those kinds of ways of shared values and inoculating against the intentional ways some leaders are trying to pit us against each other, to say why that's happening, and then to say what we do about it instead. So we have a narrative fight, a narrative mission ahead of us, and then I think a policy question. And so we are following the lead of partner organizations such as Unidos, who's organizing primarily Latinx and other immigrant communities in Minnesota, and seeing how can we partner in solidarity. I think the healthcare work is a big one. And another way we're really partnering with them is on also shared interests to make sure everybody has an affordable, dignified, climate-friendly home. And they really are concerned about the workforce opportunities and making sure that immigrants, no matter their citizenship status, could do those good jobs in the clean energy sector to help us update our homes and help you transition from a gas to an electric stove and help you make your home more energy efficient and make sure that there's good, dignified work that happens with the vast transition that needs to happen to help us decarbonize our homes. To literally build our future. So those are a couple of ways that we're partnering. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah, in the back. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So to summarize, recognizing the dignity that we want to make sure happens in elder care for the people that need the care and the people doing the caring, same with at the beginning of life, to make sure every child gets the care they need and that we're like investing in those child care workers to get every child off to a good start. Like you said, that's the foundation for their whole life. And once they get to age 5, they get to go to public school, but the most hard time of parents' lives is before that, and an expensive time of life, and the equation isn't working out, so we're trying to see that as more of a public good that needs public resources, and to make the equation work for those families that should get to make those decisions about what's right for their family, and the work that they feel meant to do, and how they want to care for their kids, as well as those who are doing the caring work. Thank you. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. So question, could there be on-site childcare in the schools, especially for school teachers? I mean, we have the superintendent in the room, if I can put you on the spot. Is that a question?
We're one of the very few school districts in Minnesota that run a licensed childcare center at all. So just up the road here, we have a world-class early learning center that our staff can access. If you're right next to Greenville Park, so your example is perfect. But if you're at Bridgewater, that's a little bit of a different. And so those things could certainly be possible. The things that we need to work on would be the facility, the ability to expand the facility so that you can have the appropriate facility to do it. The child care worker piece crisis is a big deal. We've been very fortunate because we use payroll and have good benefits in that particular field, but you would need to expand it. We are looking to expand the opportunities at the NCDC, looking at adding additional rooms in that former rebuilt park building. But those are some of the things that we on-site. Lanesboro does some on-site childcare, but they're one of the very few, they're the only school that I know that does that. They also only have one building, so it's fairly easy. And we are of course our care everywhere, which means it's equitable, so families of low income can access CCAP dollars, the county assistance program. They can use the state scholarships, both ones that we can give and that parents can use to choose. So we need to keep working on expanding within that facility and
Great.
keep all those other things.
Awesome. Quick follow-up, Judy, to that?
Yeah, I wanted to ask them about students who have children who are in school. Do they have access to that childcare?
They do. In fact, that was the reason that the Northfield School District started its own child care program a long time ago. I think David Bly, if you remember David, I think he was responsible for that. But the teenage pregnancy rate in our community is very low. So in fact, there are years where we take the seats that are reserved for teen mothers and have to give them to someone else because we don't have people who need that service.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hillman, for letting me put you on the spot. I was like, we've got the expert in the room. Thank you. Awesome. So we've made some strides forward towards our values agenda together, working together over years with persistence, sometimes like making some stepping stones along the way to make possible the big wins in 2023. We refreshed our agenda priorities with many of the things that you all were just digging into. We haven't fixed our beloved community completely yet, have we? We've got more work to do. We are called to be repairers of our beloved community and step into the breach, to do it together, to make more possible together. One of the things we learned in the 2024 legislative session was we had to then teach the legislators our new priorities. We had to socialize them. Sometimes the new ideas usually don't pass when they're first introduced. So they work out the kinks and then you gotta come back next year. We won some stepping stones in 2024, but we need to build more movement and accountability, more people power to get them done. And a common theme with all of those priorities we've listed going forward is they need more sustained resources. So we don't get pitted against each other based on issue anymore, or like one of the state senators has said, if you put more money into housing, you take some away from healthcare. Is that what you want? No, that's not okay. We need this whole list, right? It's not a finite pie. We can expand the pie, especially at the state level, especially when our local communities can already feel stretched thin, and there's not much you can do with property taxes. We should be making sure that millionaires and corporations that are doing just fine, and sometimes jacking up the costs of our lives in housing and groceries, and the list goes on, we used to tax them more at the state level in Minnesota. That was what helped make the Minnesota Miracle to fully fund our education in the 80s made possible. And it's been chipped away since then. It's time to make sure the wealthiest pay their fair share, because they've been benefiting. There's more than enough to make sure we all have what we need. And that's the best way to have a sustained, I'm going to call it an abundant moral budget going forward. And that's what we want to encourage going into 2025. What do we want to make possible in 2025 in Minnesota? And 2025 is a budget year again in Minnesota. So if you all are down, we want to strategize to lift up these set of priorities together in a whole bunch of different ways. In Minnesota, in our conversations, using the elections as a way to create the conditions to make our values agenda possible, and to say, fund this at our state level in 2025. So we are also trying to run an intervention and to shape what could change in the governor's administration. We're sending our Governor Tim Walz to run at the national stage right now, and he's talking about the things that we've won together, wasn't he? That's pretty exciting. And depending on how November shakes out, we could have Lieutenant Governor Flanagan become governor. No matter what, we want to shape the governor's budget, which they're drafting this fall to go into next legislative session that starts in January. We want to make sure that we are having our voices heard, and to say no to a politics of fear and scarcity and division, to say this is what most people want. We're organizing an abundant moral budget session, or summit, in Mankato, backyard of our current governor, and want to invite you all to help us fill a bus from Northfield. If we get enough people, we could bring a bus on October 13th. So that is one thing I wanted to invite you all to discern and to come together for, and to join hopefully a couple hundred other neighbors from the Mankato area. So that is one way I wanted to invite you in to take action this election season. When you get a chance, there's that sign-up sheet. There's one per table, so you could pass that around and sign up for that with your neighbors, pass that around, and then we can collect them at the very end. That's what we think is a way to lift up we hope, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan joins us in that room, potentially also U.S. Senator Tina Smith, who has worked with us on things like paid leave and childcare, and has said she wants to be a champion for small town and rural transit nationally. We want to invite her into that room with also local legislators to talk about how we can fund our priorities, and especially passenger rail, buses, EV infrastructure, all of that is up for discussion again. So especially encourage people to join us October 13th. And then I'll pass around in a second a voter pledge, because that is an opportunity for us to think about not only taking responsibility to vote with our values ourselves, but also who else is in your life that needs a conversation like we had tonight. Why voting, participating in our values this November matters at all. Voting for what? What do we want to make possible together? We make our future together. And the most effective conversations are in our relationships, actually. Think about who are your literal neighbors or who else in Minnesota. We will support you along the way and provide resources and sample scripts, but you would be the only ones to reach out to your people on your list. And then also to be a potential amplifier, to shape our public narrative with social media missions or letters to the editor. We will equip you to do that. Again, we talk about strategy, what are the tools in the toolbox, and then we make sure to equip you along the way to do what we get to learn along the way. So the invitation to not only participate yourselves, but to potentially move 3 to 10 people in your life that might otherwise stay home, or maybe they're in an assisted living facility and need help getting a ballot, or somebody needs help figuring out how do I vote early? How do I get an absentee ballot? Who are those college kids in your life that are trying to figure out, is this worth it? Is anybody listening to me or fighting for me? Or do I vote here or do I vote in my college district? There's people in your lives that are not a guarantee. One of my colleagues says, gotta catch them all. Every vote, every conversation is an invitation to agency and to build the beloved community that we deserve. Sound good? And then, as we pass out our voter pledge cards, I want to invite Kathleen Doran-Norton to also come up to talk about what's at stake in our democracy in Rice County in particular, because we've got democracy protection work. We want to be on offense for what we're for, and sometimes we've got to fight some bad stuff or be resilient and resistant to the efforts to undermine our democracy right in our backyard. So can I give a hand for Kathleen? She comes on up.
Can you hear me? No. Does this work? It's green. I push the green button. Oh, it didn't turn on. There is no button. Oh, it's turning on. I'll go over. Right here. You got it? The remote doesn't work.
Is that working now? All right, thanks, Dave. So I'm Kathleen Doran-Norton. For the last couple of years, I've been a leader in Isaiah, building one of the new rooms in Isaiah's house, and that is the Rural Organizing Project. The list of that you looked at of values and opportunities and things, the list for Rural Organizing Project is very similar. There are a couple of differences. One is clean water. In rural communities where folks have private wells, there's no water treatment plant. I know Northfield, some folks in Northfield are complaining about it, but with a private well, nobody takes care of your water. You have to do it yourself, and you may not have the information to take care of it either. And particularly in southeast Minnesota with nitrate issues, and northwest Minnesota and the potato fields, there are issues there. So as we're building the house, we had conversations with our county commissioners and county staff. And we went down this list of priorities that the Rural Organizing Project pulled together from 1,000 conversations. And it looked very much like this list, as I had said before, with the exception of clean water. And so we talked to the county commissioner and the county staff, and will tell us about childcare and tell us about affordable housing. And at the end of the meeting, the county administrator said, "We didn't talk about democracy." I went, "Okay, so tell us what's going on." So after the last election, some concerned citizens took the county clerk to court and charged her with abusing her position. There were social media about the county election staff, continued and continued, so much so that the husband of the county clerk thought it necessary to put security cameras around their house. The county clerk met with county election staff along with a counselor, and she and the county administrator were surprised at the level of anxiety that folks have about elections and the phone calls that they're receiving. Back in February, as is the case before every election, the county election staff go through the validation of the voting machines. So this would have been just before the presidential primary election. And there was a room full of folks who were pretty agitated. And I found out, someone sent me a video of a training session that had occurred prior to the validation of the election machines. A 2-hour training session held down in Faribault. Started out pretty innocuous, but as it went through, this group was teaching folks how to disrupt voting, how to avoid the voting machines, move to hand counting voting. And so they disrupted the validation process, so much so that the county sheriff came into the room and walked to, thankfully he had his uniform on, and so as he walked to the front of the room, it did calm down somewhat. But there was a lot of yelling going on. There was a representative from the Secretary of State there who had to be escorted back to their car. I could not imagine this happening here. As I say these words, I cannot imagine this is happening here. I live in Bridgewater Township, and we did our elections. People were serious about it. They stepped forward. There was no issue. And somehow, people have got it in their minds that there's something wrong with the way that we do elections. I can understand their basic concern. We're all concerned about having fair elections, free elections, ones that are counted correctly. But there are these sticky lies that sort of attach to the process. Just this last Tuesday, the county commissioners passed a resolution, to pay for the software that they're going to need for the upcoming elections, and they had someone stand up talking about CrowdStrike. Remember that? Or CloudStrike, when the Microsoft software went crazy and how that was going to affect our elections. It doesn't have anything to do with our voting machines. So we've got an election staff here in our county that's besieged. And we potentially have an issue with this upcoming election. Now, there's a group that Isaiah is partner with, a coalition that includes League of Women Voters and Common Cause and Isaiah and 40 different other organizations. And what they're suggesting are a few actions. There's going to be a press conference down in Rochester to talk about all of the things that have happened for our election. In October, there's going to be a thank you day for folks to write letters, to make phone calls, to let our election workers know that we appreciate them, that we believe in what they're doing. And then there's a third action that I'm checking out right now to see if it would be something that is helpful, and that is at the shutdown process at the end of the evening, November 5th, are there places in Rice County here that we need to have observed? Not getting involved, but just observing to make sure that the head judges are not being challenged, that there isn't a threat of somebody trying to hand count ballots or anything like that. So, and then I would just say one more thing that's not necessarily connected to group action, and that it's just personal action. My neighbor stopped me a week ago walking the dog around the block. And she said, "Kathleen, I hear felons can vote." And I said, "Yeah, that's right. How did that happen?" And I said, "Well, folks finish, almost everyone who is incarcerated in jail comes back to our community. Almost everyone. And Minnesota has very long probation times, 20, 30 years. And so people are not voting after they leave prison. They've done their time. They've done everything that they're supposed to do, and they couldn't vote. And it's known that when people become a part of the community, when they can vote, when they can participate in the community, they're much less likely to recidivate. So she said, but what about this driver's license for immigrants? They're voting. I said, no. First of all, the driver's license is not the validation of being a citizen. We've got legal residents who live here, who have driver's licenses, who are from other countries but are legal residents here. They can't vote. And besides, folks who are immigrants are already so vulnerable. People take advantage of them in every way, and they're not going to risk their family. They're not going to risk their being here by illegally voting. Besides, they're just not dumb. They're smarter than that. So I would just encourage you all just to have those private conversations with your neighbors. If somebody says something, speak up. Let them know that it's okay, that these changes that were made in 2023 are good changes. They bring us all together. They bring us together as Minnesotans. So hopefully you'll think about democracy and elections as part of your action, and you can make a note on these sign-up sheets. If you want to come to a voting machine validation, there's some coming up, and we'll have a group driving down. So let me know if you want to be part of democracy action. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, so we know we need to wrap. I'll leave you with this invitation to become, if you're not already, lean into that spirit of being repairers of our beloved community, to lean into those tough conversations with those you know and love or are just starting to meet. Lean in with love, with compassionate curiosity. Don't stay isolated or venting in your kitchen. There's more people out there that feel like that, and they deserve the invitation to a conversation with you about what we do about it together. What are we concerned about? What are we hopeful for? What do we do about it together? And we don't need to have all the right answers before we step in. We are the experts of our experience. We know how things are affecting us and people we love, and we can figure out what to do about it together. We don't want to leave people feeling like we're just in the twists and turns of the presidential race, but also the entire Minnesota House is up, which could determine what's possible here in our state. And do we keep building on what we've been doing? The local city races could make a big impact, in particular on housing and climate and land use and transportation. The school referendum, the safe, smart, sustainable proposal that needs you to go all the way to the back of your ballot and say yes, yes, and yes for all of those things to be possible, to update our high school, to have investments in the short term that save people money in the long term and reduce our climate emissions too. If you want to chat more about that, Dr. Hillman's in the room, Leah's in the room, wave too, they'll be around for you if you need, if you have more questions. We are in this together. I'll stick around. I know we're past time, so I apologize about that, but thank you for digging in with me tonight, and happy to continue the conversation beyond tonight as well. All right. Last thing before I forget, if you have a few to work on your voter pledge card, and then leave the top portion on that back table when you leave the room. You can keep the bottom for yourself, for your reference, and we'll follow up with you and support you. Sign up for the Abundant Moral Budget Summit on that sheet going around your table. I'll turn it back to Marty. Thanks, everyone.
We almost finished on time. Is this on? Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. We hope to see you for our first Thursday in October, Courageous Conversations, which will be Angela Danker speaking on the threat of white nationalism. Thank you so much for coming. Drive safely.